Okay, so normally I'd put my intro here and I would just get on with it, right? But I have a few things I'd like to say. I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for the support. I've only been at this for maybe a couple months and we're already at 250 subs. The growth on this channel is actually insane. I wasn't expecting this level of progression so quickly, but again, I'm really quite thankful for it. I hope to bring more content to you all really soon. I'm so glad I can share my love for this series with all of you, and along with that, I now have a Patreon. I put a lot of time, energy, and resources into making these videos, and if you'd like to support me, the link to my Patreon will be on my channel and the description below. I'm saving up a bit of money for better recording equipment and a capture card so I can improve the production value of these videos. Currently, I only have a $10 tier, but you get to see the blooper reels from recording, and you get to vote for what videos I'll do in the future. You can also make video suggestions to me directly since you get a direct line of communication with me. Oh, and I'll be giving patrons a shout out at the end of every video. Every bit of support is appreciated, but of course it's not a requirement. Simply you guys watching these videos allows me to grow as a channel and as a creator. And in turn, you guys get better content out of it. So again, I'd like to thank you all for everything so far. But with that said, I know y'all came to hear me talk about the RE1 remake. So let's get right into it. Welcome to our final deep dive into the birth of survival horror. I've mentioned this remake in 3 other videos if I'm not mistaken, so it's time that I actually go over it. I know that this game was a lot of people's introduction to the series, so I hope you're excited to hear my analysis. RE1 Remake should be the gold standard for video game remakes in my humble opinion. Everything from the original was improved upon. Controls, combat mechanics, character performances, the storyline, just about anything that you can think of has had improvements made to it. If you haven't played this game, I implore that you stop the video, go and play it, and then come back. This is going to be a pretty spoiler-heavy review of the game. The PC version is cheap, and it's an older game, so if you really wanted to, you could just emulate the GameCube version. Also, if you haven't played the game, why the hell are you here? Go play it. So, let's not dally any longer. Let's make our last mad dash through the Spencer Mansion and see what's been changed. In 2002, the Nintendo GameCube was released to the public. Games like RE2, 3, and Code Veronica were ported to the GameCube shortly after. Can you see something kind of important missing? That's right, Resident Evil 1. There was a remake in the works as part of an exclusivity deal between Capcom and Nintendo. The bad English localization and the heavily outdated graphics were 2 key motivators for the remake. These were seen as barriers to new players wanting to get into Biohazard. So, the goal this go-around was to improve upon gameplay a bit while completely overhauling the story, visuals, and audio. Using pre-rendered environments was a huge asset in this time around. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. This freed up processing power for higher fidelity models, particle effects, and more detailed lighting. While the original looked great for its time, you can feel the atmosphere and aesthetic of the remake just ooze off of the screen. From flashes of lightning to swaying trees, and the yellowish glow of indoor lighting. It all creates a very uniquely unsettling atmosphere. This upgrade applies to the character models as well. These models were sculpted after actual people, allowing for a more realistic feel. Along with this, motion capture was used to animate the character models. All of these things combined allowed for an insane upgrade in visuals from the original. Even small things like the camera tracking the player up the stairs instead of getting a cutscene every time allows for more immersion. Those stair animations were cool and all, but they're very repetitive at times and sort of take you out of the game after a while. Of course, I'm sure you're not here to listen as I drone on about the development history, so let's get into the really fun stuff. Time to talk about what was improved between the first game and the remake. The most obvious difference comes in terms of the visuals. I spoke on it a little bit earlier, but let me tell you, they really overhauled the graphics. The number one priority was to create a large amount of contrast between the light sources and the shadows. This grants the game a striking visual identity, but it also allows for enemies to appear unexpectedly from areas of darkness. Color plays a huge part in the visuals as well. Sickly greens, eerie yellows, and chilling blues permeate the entire game. The mansion, for example, is completely covered with the color yellow in some areas. This isn't the nice, warm yellow that you associate with your kind old grandma that makes you cookies. This is the type of yellow that makes you a tad nauseous when you look at it for too long. It's heavily desaturated and instills a feeling of dread in you. Then, to the complete contrast of the yellow tones, we have the usage of the color blue. It's always used in a very striking manner, whether it be from flashes of lightning or the pale moon beaming down on the graveyard. Green is used as the bridge between the two colors, making everything feel sickly and disgusting, but in a very subtle way. From a rotting graveyard to the pale lighting of the underground labs to the weathered green wallpaper and flooring of the mansion. It's actually kind of insane how big of a role lighting and color plays in this game, especially for a game that came out in 2002. A lot of games from this period were either really cartoony or just were brown. Just brown. This game came out over 2 decades ago, and yet the visuals look like, they could have been put together in the past 10 years. This includes the character models. Each one of them was modeled after a real person and then mocapped for animation. And let me tell you, these two factors just breathe new life into the characters. Every facial expression and small movement communicates information to the player about the characters and story. When you see Barry in a cutscene, you don't think he's having some sort of constipated seizure like in the original. Big baddie daddy zaddy Barry is now available in a high poly count. Isn't he just stunning? Speaking of characterization, this brings me right around to the voice acting. Again, they did a complete overhaul of line delivery, voice direction, and a whole new cast of voice actors. All of this is great, well, except for the last 10 minutes of the game, but we don't talk about that, not in this household.
You killed Enrico with your own dirty hands!
Lines like Jill Sandwich are still in here, but reworked to sound more natural and less out of place. The line delivery was overseen by, an actual voice director, so that means a majority of the lines sound like they're delivered by English speakers, as opposed to the mess we got in the original. Lovable mess, but still a mess. Moments from the 96 version that were laughable now actually have some degree of emotional impact and weight. Also, for some reason after this, every version of Wesker we see is more British than the Queen of England.
It appears Umbrella is finished.
You're just gonna walk away? Our research isn't complete. We can make a more powerful virus.
Do what you like.
The way characters are written and performed in this game also gives a bit more personality to them, and it sets up a certain level of continuity with the future games. Chris is set up to be the authority figure he becomes in the later games. Barry is written as if he's slowly but surely becoming an old man. You can also tell that he's very conflicted about serving Wesker's plot for the sake of his family's safety. He obviously feels an extreme amount of guilt for betraying the STARS team. The voice acting heavily contrasts and improves upon the goofy setup of the original, and this can be said for the intro and story elements as well. The atmosphere for this introduction sequence is a lot more mysterious and unsettling. Joseph's death is framed in a really visually interesting found footage style that adds a whole new level of intensity to the opening. Rest in pieces, Joseph. You shall surely be missed. One thing hasn't changed though. Brad is still an asshole. Wesker actually saves Chris and Jill in the title sequence, so if you were part of the new generation of Resident Evil fans playing the game in 2002, then you likely would have been completely fooled by Wesker's facade. There's so much depth added to the title sequence alone, and it doesn't stop there. This applies to the storytelling throughout the game, and there's no better representation of this than the tale of Lisa Trevor. Lisa Trevor's story is one of the most in-depth and tragic character backstories in the series. And this is without her even being a main character. She's simply an enemy you fight in the game. It exemplifies the horrors of what Umbrella was doing with its virus experimentation, and how it exploits innocent people. I'm not going to go over the story of the entire game since it's very similar to the original, but I will go over Lisa Trevor's tale, because she's a completely new addition to the lore and series. Lisa's father, George Trevor, along with his company, was commissioned to design and build the Arclay Mansion in 1964. Once the mansion was completed in 1967, George and his family were invited to stay at the Spencer Mansion by Oswald Spencer himself. George wasn't immediately able to attend, so his wife, Jessica, and his daughter, Lisa, made their way to the mansion, where they realized everything wasn't as pleasant as they'd hoped. Upon their arrival, Jessica and Lisa were snatched up and taken to the underground area under the mansion. There, they were injected with various strains of the progenitor virus. The two were subject to multiple experiments and tests over the course of the next week, until Lisa's mother was killed due to her reaction to the virus in her body being suboptimal. Lisa, on the other hand, evolved strength unlike any other human due to her injection. Over the course of the next 3 decades, Lisa was experimented on and deteriorated mentally in that time. During this period, she was moved into the Arclay labs, and that's where she resides during the events of the Resident Evil 1 remake. The story of Lisa Trevor exemplifies how the games aren't just stories about zombies. It's about horrible experiences being thrust upon innocent people. The horror of this series doesn't just come from zombies or monsters or creatures that could impale you 3 times over. I'm looking at you, Tyron. It comes from the horrors of the human experience. And getting impaled. That's pretty bad too.
Wesker!
This is shown in her diary entries as well. She writes from the perspective of a little girl having never grown up. She misses her mom and slowly loses her sanity over time. This places a certain level of despondency on the player going through the info in this game, and it works very effectively. This is what Resident Evil has always been about, and it's shown through Lisa's story. This brings me to her implementation in the game. Lisa appears multiple times as an enemy. Shooting her doesn't really do much, and it will just be a waste of ammo. You gotta haul ass out of there and hope she doesn't break you like a pencil. I think Lisa Trevor's design is actually really cool. She wears a mask made out of human faces due to her delusions of people trying to steal her mother's face. These rotting skin masks are actually really unsettling, but they make her very interesting visually. In her final boss battle, you can either try and shoot her off the ledge, or you can slide all of the stones off the ledge and avoid getting hit while doing so. This will open a door, and more importantly, the grave of Lisa Trevor's mother will open up. Lisa grabs the old skull in the coffin and jumps off the ledge, leaving you alone. I personally would recommend saving ammo and just sliding the big stones around, but if you want to waste God knows how many bullets on this girl, be my guest. Don't blame me when you're walking around with 3 handgun bullets later on and you get tossed around by a hunter. I know this from experience. This one piece of the story shows the love and care that went into this revamp of an old title. The crazy part is, if you're not really exploring and you're just playing the game willy-nilly, you might completely miss out on this information. The info given to the player is often done subtly, using similar techniques to games such as Dark Souls. You get story info from journals around the mansion and various instances of environmental storytelling. This attention to detail really sells the story and gets you to appreciate the small things. Now, as much as I love the story improvements, you can't really have a game without gameplay, can you? Otherwise, you're just watching a movie. You didn't come here to hear me talk about a movie, did you? Let's start off with the puzzles, since those are the simplest. The puzzles from the original game are all still here, but in a manner that's different from the 96 version. This adds a level of freshness to the puzzles for returning players. Certain doors can't be opened by the lockpick in this version of the game, so even Biohazard veterans must do a little bit of searching and noggin utilization in order to figure out how to continue. Along with that, there are entire new areas that play into the various puzzles you have to solve to progress. New inclusions such as the golden arrow and the death masks are required to get into certain doors and segments of the mansion. Hidden passages, secret doors, and key items are all completely different and located in places you wouldn't expect sometimes. Combat is pretty similar to the original, except for a few key things that change the game more drastically than you'd expect at first. First off, we're given a quick turn to traverse more smoothly through the mansion. This is actually a small critique I had for the first game in my last video. That's right, self-plug, go check it out, it's pretty ballin'.
I got a Glock in my Rari.
The original Biohazard required you to either walk backwards or slowly turn around to avoid an enemy coming towards you. In the remake, you're allowed a quick turn. This gives you much more mobility, and it's pretty straightforward. You press a button, and bada bing bada boom, you do a little spin. Along with the quick turn, we also have a huge inclusion in defense items. These bad boys are going to be your best friend the entire game. If an enemy grabs you, you're given the option to either use a defense item or take the bite. You can stab them, or you can give them a little flash grenade snack that explodes in their mouth, or you can tase them with a single blast taser. Once you use a defense item, it can't be used again. Although Jill has access to a taser that can be used multiple times, but you have to find battery packs for it. On the other hand, Chris is the only one who can use flash grenades. Both Chris and Jill can use the dagger defense item. The best part is that they don't take up inventory space. There's no huge downside to using these. Generally, you want to avoid wasting your defense item on weaker enemies, since you're not going to take as much damage from them. But if you want to do a decent bit of damage to a stronger enemy like a Crimson Head, and you want to avoid taking damage, then a defense item is the way to go. Along with your trusty old shotgun and grenade launcher, of course. Of course, you're going to be using a lot of grenades and shotgun rounds for the bosses, who have been significantly improved upon in the remake. This version of Yawn looks a lot cooler than the original, and in his boss fight you have a lot more room to work with, so he's not constantly surrounding you. Now, he can still get around you and trap you to do damage, but there's a way around that instead of just praying to whatever god you worship like you would have to do to avoid getting hurt in the original. The Tyrant's boss fight is very similar to the original, but he's been redesigned a tad to be more grotesque. Plant 42 actually looks like a plant in comparison to the original where he looked like a malformed alien genitalia. They overhauled his boss battle as well, giving you 2 floors to work with instead of just running around a big square room hoping you don't get grabbed. This fight has a lot more strategy involved than the original. And Black Tiger isn't really different whatsoever, not looks wise or fight wise. To be fair though, that boss was fine enough in the first game, so it's not a huge deal. That's not all though. We've been given new bosses as well. I mentioned Lisa Trevor earlier, but there's also the inclusion of Neptune. He's just a random shark in the original and he just sits in a hallway, but in the remake they gave him a whole ass boss battle. Neptune's fight isn't a fight in the traditional sense. If you saved Richard in Chris's playthrough, you'll get a cutscene where he narrowly saves you from Neptune the shark, sacrificing himself. From there, you have to run from Neptune and make it to the water pressure control room. And then you gotta, well, deal with the water pressure, kind of self-explanatory from there. In order to speak about the next boss, I gotta explain what a Crimson Head is. In the original version of the game, enemies stayed dead when you killed them. In the remake, however, once you kill a zombie enemy, an unseen timer starts ticking down. After a certain period of time, the zombie you killed will reanimate again as a Crimson Head. These fucks are really hard to make stay down. Not only that, but they do more damage and run fast as hell. The Crimson Head prototype is like the beefed up Crimson Head zombies, but even worse. And he's the boss you gotta fight. He's better, faster, stronger, and could slam the $6 million man on his head. He's pretty straightforward. You gotta treat him like a zombie enemy, but you gotta be a lot quicker or you'll be turned into a red smear. As you can see, there is quite the variety of bosses to deal with. There was a decent variety of bosses in the original, but the remake really kicks it up a notch. And that's all she wrote. If you've watched all the way through this and you still have not played it for some reason, I think it's still worth it, even having spoiled a little bit of the story. Especially if you haven't tried the original yet. Even 20 years later, it still holds up to scrutiny. You can feel the care put into every inch of this game, and it's as scary as ever. I am glad to announce to you that Resident Evil Remake is indeed ballin'. They did my beautiful boy Barry justice, so he gets a Jill sandwich out of 10 from me. If you enjoyed the video, I ask that you drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe for new content. Remember, you can get all sorts of stuff from my Patreon, and you'll get your name in the end credits here. Until next time, stay alive, stay safe, stay human.